Well, believe it or not, the Eagles tried to add another quarterback to the roster, although Howie Roseman wasn't able to get it done with that player headed to Dallas now. However, when it comes to the most important moves, Vic Fangio finally said what a lot of us have been thinking. And in this video, I'll get into what that was, why there's a couple positions in particular that the DC was referencing, and exactly what options are out there. Plus, the Birds are meeting with another edge rusher, and the more you hear from this draft prospect, he seems like the ideal candidate for Fangio's defense. Also, the latest NFL signing is not the best news for hopes of retaining Dallas Goedert. Meanwhile, the Tush Push conspiracy drags on with Roger Goodell's latest input, so let's talk about why the league is so against the play, plus all the other rule changes and how they affect Philly. But first, let's run it. What's up, guys? Do me a favor, drop a like on this video, and then let's start out with some quarterback news. So it turns out that Howie Roseman was actually in the running to add another quarterback to bolster the depth. Now, unfortunately, he didn't win out on the bid after Jordan Schultz reported that the Patriots would be trading quarterback Joe Milton and a 7th-round pick to the Cowboys in exchange for a 5th-round pick.
I'm not even mad. That's amazing.
Yeah, this is actually one of the few moves that I'd say Dallas got right. Yet what might even be more surprising is that it was revealed that the Eagles were in play to try and trade for Milton. And as Anthony DeBona said, that's certainly notable considering that Howie also traded for Dorian Thompson-Robinson in the Kenny Pickett deal. However, as we all know, there's nothing that's off the table for the Birds this offseason.
One thing that I can promise our fans is that there will not be a player that's available that we won't study, that we won't look at and see if it can help the team. Sometimes those opportunities work and you're able to do that, and sometimes they don't.
Look, I can appreciate that Philly's inquiring about every position, but Vic Fangio left a very clear message for Howie Roseman recently about how he feels, when he said get him some players, and I don't blame him. I mean, gone from the #1 defense in the NFL are Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Darius Slay, Brandon Graham, Isaiah Rodgers, Oren Burks, and Devontae Maddox. Which, for you numbers people out there, those 7 guys played a combined 3,800 defensive snaps during the regular season, plus another 1,200 in the postseason. So naturally, with such a large void, Fangio didn't hold back on his honest assessment, telling NBC's John Clark that it's a tough part of the business, but also that it gives him the opportunity and a reason to wear out Howie, saying he's definitely got to find me a replacement for those guys now. Alright, sorry, the serious part of this and the key thing to acknowledge is the statement from Fangio is coming after already signing Josh Uche, Azeez Ojulari, and Adoree Jackson. Granted, even Fangio is still optimistic that Howie and the team will find a way with the draft coming up, along with the opportunity to hopefully land some guys later on. But at the same time, though, the DC didn't mince words about just how much they gave up, saying, yeah, we lost 5 starters, and 2 of those guys, their backups we lost also, so we lost a lot of players. By the way, just in case you're struggling to recall the backups and the starters Fangio was emphasizing, that was Josh Sweat and Brandon Graham, as well as Darius Slay and Isaiah Rodgers. Yet obviously, safety and linebacker are potential concerns as well. However, I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's time to get all worked up because this is kind of where we were last offseason. At least with the thought process or wondering how Vic Fangio was going to turn one of the league's worst defenses around. But add in 2 of the best corners in the draft and a hidden gem in Jalix Hunt in the 3rd round, and the defense got a bigger boost than everyone anticipated. Yes, you're right. Zach Bond turning into an all-pro, Nakobe Dean elevating his play, along with Nolan Smith paid huge dividends as well. Granted, having said that, I still think that it's noteworthy to hear Vic Fangio say that he's wearing out Howie and that there's, a chance or should really go out there and get some more replacements for the guys. Heck, even unprompted, Fangio himself brought up the edge position as one of the first potential areas to still add a piece or 2, with the DC admitting he's been watching some film from the last season and keeps on wishing BG was coming back. Of course, we all know that's done and in the past, and Fangio was partially joking, but I won't deny whether it's in the draft or another pickup on the edge is something to focus on.
I'm all for playing the best guys. I think if you looked at my history when we've had rookies, we've played them. And provided they're good enough. We ain't playing somebody just because they're young. If we were an expansion team like I was in 2 places, we might just throw them out there to see what we got. But I don't, we got more serious business here. So if they're worthy of playing, they will play.
There's plenty of prospects, and we've talked about several over the last couple weeks. Like Tyler Barron out of Miami, who came in for a top 30 visit after recording 48 total pressures in 250 pass rushing snaps last season. And at 6'5", 258 pounds, he's got a seemingly ideal stature to fit in Philly's defensive front for Fangio. At the same time, this is a dude who's projected to be a day 3 pick, so I don't know that he's ultimately the answer. Personally, and I've kind of said this before, if I'm adding edge help via the draft and want someone to impact from day one, that's Boston College's Donovan Ezraku. Remember, this dude had 16.5 sacks last season and 21 tackles for loss. And with some of the best bend among prospects in the draft and an impressive sub-7 3-cone drill, it wouldn't be a surprise to see him hit the ground running. Oh, there's also Elijah Roberts from SMU, and he can be an absolute menace as a pass rusher, yet it's unclear if he'd play on the outside or the inside in the NFL. But with a day 2 projection, perhaps he could fill in as a void or hybrid player for BG and Milton Williams. Although honestly, there's one guy that continues to vault up the draft boards and just feels like the perfect ideal fit for Fangio in this defense. And that is Oluwafemi Oladejo. Like the former UCLA edge rusher had been an off-ball linebacker up until last season, where he then made the transition to pass rusher and began to show some promise. Now yes, I've talked about him before, but at just 21 years old, I think it would be reckless to just go ahead and write him off simply because his numbers are less than ideal in an incredibly small sample size. After all, he's still got great athleticism, and you can see his untapped potential and versatility every time you turn on the tape. But shout out to Ryan Fowler for this, it's actually the intrinsic qualities that seem to be the most aligned for Philly's culture.
For someone out there that's just looking at Femi's tape, Femi Oladejo, but they want to get to know the player behind the face mask a little bit more, what are teams getting in Femi Oladejo when they draft you potentially in the next month or so?
I think they're getting a player that is just personable. Personable in a great way, and meaning I can relate to anybody and everybody, whether you're white, black, Latino, Caucasian, Asian, female, male. I'm going to make you laugh. I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to push you. I have integrity. I'm a hard worker, disciplined. I have aspirations for life. I have vision for myself. I have goals. And overall, like I said earlier, I just want to strive to go from good to great each and every day, and then from there, great to greater. So that's what I would say.
Come on, I don't know about you, but I would be absolutely hyped if Howie ended up getting this guy in the draft. Again, think about Fangio taking Zach Bond from an edge and making him an off-ball all-pro linebacker. Or how about Jalix Hunt? Like, let's not forget that was the player Fangio demanded Howie Roseman go and get during last year's draft. And that did turn out to be one of the most underrated picks in the entire draft, because his untapped potential became visible incredibly early on, and Jalix's experience having previously been a safety was invaluable for when he dropped back into coverage. Plus, I haven't even mentioned Cooper DeJean yet. Remember, so many people were wondering where he would play or what the difference would be if he's going to be a safety, wouldn't be locked down corner enough, or just didn't have the fluidity to play in the slot. Except all Coop's versatility did with Fangio and Christian Parker's tutelage was make him the best slot corner in the entire league. Anyway, I've made my case pretty clear for Femi on the Eagles, but there's a lot to like. Also, on that topic, because I've gotten a couple questions about the Birds and what they'll do with Jordan Davis's fifth-year option, Howie is still a huge fan of JD, and it's sounding very likely that they'll eventually pick up that option. Because in case you didn't hear about Howie talking about the man in the middle, he raved about JD's ability to elevate his play toward the latter part of the season last year and make some big plays in the NFC Championship game, while also saying that the Eagles are counting on him to continue to develop and improve, which is exactly what they've seen from him so far. I mean, honestly, the biggest question has been, or continues to be, will JD show up and make those plays? Will he put the work in? And we did see a change last year. I mean, kudos to him because he definitely took strides last year thanks to the guidance and old school mentality of Fangio.
These players will work and give you everything they got within reason. And there's too much of, and that starts at an early age, when they're in high school, college, everybody, less is more type thing. They preserve your energy. You guys hear it in the NBA and load management, and I talk to coaches from other sports that I know, and, it drives them crazy. But the players are willing to work. Never had an issue with that. And they're still willing to work. But we, as the so-called adults in the room, need to push them.
By the way, on the topic of pushing them, Zach Berman did share that the Eagles will have 6 days of OTAs this year and 1 day of mandatory minicamp, with the dates being May 27th and 28th, May 30th, June 2nd and 3rd, and June 5th, and then the mandatory session being on June 10th. However, some people suggested that maybe they're going softer because it turns out the Birds are actually the only team in the NFL with 1 day of mandatory minicamp. FYI, every other team has at least 2 scheduled sessions. But I'll just say this, before anyone overreacts to that news with the OTAs, it's not that big of a deal. As long as training camp, that's the thing that really matters. As long as they're getting the work in there, then we have nothing to worry about. Although we probably do have something to worry about when it comes to Dallas Goedert, because the Arizona Cardinals just made Trey McBride the highest paid tight end in league history, offering the 25-year-old a 4-year, $76 million extension with $43 million of that guaranteed. Plus, like Anthony DeBona pointed out, now you also have Juwan Johnson playing on a 3-year deal worth $30.7 million and $21.2 million guaranteed. And Evan Ingram, whose contract is 2 years for $23 million with $16.5 million guaranteed, and he's also the same age as Dallas Goedert. It pains me to say it, but Goedert feels like one of those casualties that's a foregone conclusion. It's really not a question of if, but when. Anyway, when it comes to an additional 18th game for the NFL, it's pretty much the same story. Since in case you didn't catch it, Roger Goodell revealed that the league is looking into adding an 18-game schedule as soon as a couple years. And adding 2 and 2 together, that's clearly a sign of money being the main motivating factor, which is really the case for most things. Yet it's especially hilarious to think about that and then listen to the commissioner's take on why the Tush Push is being looked at getting banned.
Listen, the discussion on the Tush Push was very good. It was, we showed a lot of data, a lot of questions from the clubs, a lot of discussion about it. I think there are safety issues that are being considered in that case. We have very little data from it, but it's beyond data. There's also, there's the mechanism of injury that we study, that type of thing that leads us to show the risk involved with a particular player, particular tackle. So those are things that we did discuss. I do think there's a lot of discussion about going back to the previous rule, back to pre-2004. It's a dispute about how long that rule was in play, but the reality of it is I think that's makes a lot of sense in many ways because I think it expands it beyond just that single play. There are a lot of plays where you see someone pulling or pushing somebody that are not in the tush push formation that I think do have an increased risk of injury. And so I think the committee will look at that and come back in May with some proposals.
Are you with me there? Like, that feels incredibly hypocritical. Also, when Goodell said there's very little data, here's the thing. They do have the data. It just doesn't agree with their desired outcome. Of course, I'm referring to Adam Schefter's recent report about several owners being jealous of Philly, combined with Goodell's not liking the look of the Brotherly Shove, so therefore the thought is that it'll eventually get banned when they reconvene in mid-May to vote on an alternative solution. Now look, this feels like the league is out to get Philly, but if they really wanted to, then they would also put them on Hard Knocks. Which what I'm referencing there is Hard Knocks has loosened its rules on which teams can be forced into the training camp edition, where now the previous playoff exemption, if you had been a playoff team the last 2 years, is gone, meaning more teams are eligible to be forced into it. However, I'll admit, when it comes to the Tush Push, anything else with controversy, I'm not the most unbiased source either. So I figured with this rule controversy and other changes to the league for this coming season, why not get Fox Sports NFL rules analyst Dean Blandino for some additional insight?
I'm curious to get your thoughts here because the Tush Push postponement, pretty much everyone's seen this by now, but it's been postponed on the rule changes. I think the reports were there were 16 in favor, 16 opposed, and then they postpone it till mid-May. Why does that happen necessarily?
Yeah, so in my experience, whenever a rule gets postponed, they call it tabled, right? We're going to table it to the May meeting. There's two off-season league meetings. The one big meeting March and end of March, early April, where everybody's there, ownership, GMs, coaches. That's where the majority of the rules change proposals get discussed and get voted on. If there is a rules change proposal that needs more work, they want to study it more, they want to consider it after going through more data, whatever it may be, they'll table it to May. And that's what they're doing with this, with the Tush Push proposal, that obviously the Packers are the team that are proposing it. It's really split down the middle. The competition committee is split on this. You mentioned 16 for, 16 against with the 32 clubs. So it'll be interesting how this plays out. Typically when something is tabled now, they're going to go back and look at, is there more injury data we can pull? We're going to talk to more teams. We're going to tweak. One of the things they're going to do with this, they're going to tweak that language. They're going to look back at the pre-2006 rulebook language, which the push was outlawed for forever up until 2006. The Packers proposal was specific to the Tush Push. I think they're going to look at maybe not just the Tush Push, but downfield, linemen hitting the pile, those types of things. So it could get voted on in May. We'll see how the rest of the discussions play out.
I'm glad you brought that up too, because I was, going back trying to read these different articles and takes on that from 2006, and also the reasons why it had been kind of done away with. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a little bit difficult, or maybe the thought was it's difficult to officiate. Like, okay, is the player pushing the ball carrier? Is he pushing an opposing or another teammate there? That's
exactly right.
Is that the
exactly
same?
Right.
Okay.
And so it had been in the rule book forever, right? And it just hadn't been called, just for the reasons you stated. It was difficult. The downfield stuff, we didn't have this play in 2005, right? There was no tush push where had that been the case, it's pretty obvious when it's happening, right? It's a design play. This was just organically happening downfield. And like you said, are the offensive players pushing the ball carrier? Are they pushing the other linemen? Are they pushing the defense? And it became a hard play to officiate. And so the competition committee felt that if we have a rule that is not going to be officiated, let's take it out. It wasn't a player safety concern at that time. And that's how it went out. And now, really fast forward from 06, 15 years later, the Eagles come up with this play, and now we're having this discussion.
And all things come full circle in a way, in a roundabout way. I'm all for player safety. So I'll say that first and foremost. All for player safety. There's things that the NFL has done away with that is absolutely, I'm 100% in agreement. I am certainly biased. Yes, it's very easy for people to tell. But at the same time, I'm looking at that play, and I hear some of the arguments. And, it's like, yeah, they're looking at some data. Do we have a whole lot of data? There has not been very many reports of injuries, even in the kind of investigative part that they've done. The NFL has been transparent and forthcoming with that too, saying no, there is not yet. But the thought or the belief, I think Alan Sills, chief medical officer for the NFL, had said it's the posture of the play that could lead to catastrophic injuries. But to me, I'm sitting there going like, isn't that a slippery slope? Like, where do we draw the line of what a catastrophic potential injury is?
Health and safety is to me, this is not a health and safety issue. It's not, and I'm not in favor of the play, and I'll explain why. But it's not a health and safety reason, because there is a risk involved in this play, but there's a risk involved in every play. There's a risk involved in short yardage plays, the posture, all of those things, and the data is telling us that this play isn't any more dangerous than any other play, right? So that's where you start with rules changes. Do we have a play that is creating unnecessary risk? And I get the Alan Sills and the medical people saying, well, we want to be proactive, but like I said, that catastrophic injury, we've seen it happen in other plays, in other situations. So I don't think this play necessarily creates unnecessary risk. So I think a lot of times the league will just kind of hide behind health and safety because it's hard. Like Josh, you started with, I'm all for player safety, right? It's almost like we got to qualify that.
Yes,
look,
yes.
I'm all for player safety, and I think that's where we get kind of sometimes caught up. To me, the argument against this play, and I know it's split, and look, I get it. And the Eagles have committed to this play, and they do it better than anybody else. And to say that we're going to take this play away, to kind of take an advantage away from the Eagles, I don't think that's right either. And I think a lot of clubs feel that way, right? The Eagles just won the Super Bowl. I think some clubs feel like we don't want to vote this out because we're going to see that's sour grapes. We can't stop it. And we're taking something away from a team that has been successful with it. To me, the issue comes down to is this a fair play when you think about offensive and defensive balance, right? The rule was you couldn't push the ball carrier forever because that was deemed unfair, right? You're now aiding the runner in getting yardage where the defense doesn't get that same opportunity. Because if you tackle a runner, stand up that runner at the line of scrimmage and drive him back 20 yards, well, the defense isn't going to get that 20 yards. We're going to have forward progress. So to me, it's more of a fairness debate. Whether you agree or disagree on that issue, to me, it's more, is this a fair play where the offense can do something and the defense doesn't get that same advantage? And I think we have eliminated pushing in other areas, like on field goal attempt and extra point attempt in terms of blocking, punt block. And so that's where I think the debate should be. And wherever you land on it, you land on it. But that's kind of just my take on it.
Okay. Well, I'll say this. I can respect that take a lot more than the player safety, because for a lot of the reasons that you just mentioned there. But, you're sitting here and looking like the data or the injury history or the lack thereof and going like, yeah, but there's not really as much that we've seen historically. And, let's just face it, football can be dangerous. Football has a lot of injuries. It just happens. So, there's things that, sure, we outlaw because of it. But yeah, I can understand. I think back to, honestly, the NFC Championship, as you were talking about, unfair for the certain teams, and the play, the longest second down in NFL history, something like that. The Commanders just kept jumping over the line. It's like, you can't stop it. Yeah. So
yeah, no doubt, and that's where I think, and that you certainly don't want to see, and that was a one-off, right? We haven't seen that,
sure,
but you do think about, okay, what are defenses going to try to scheme up to stop this, and you try to think proactively. Okay, are we going to now jump over the top? Does that create an injury risk? But again, this has always been the push and pull between offensive and defensive, right? That you've got to stop the offense. The offense is trying to gain yardage. So, but I think I would agree that the health and safety argument is that's not the right argument on this one. While it always has to be a factor, I don't think that's the prevailing argument here.
Okay, let me ask you one more thing before we move on to some of the other league rules, because Philly fans want to know, and I can say it as much as possible, but again, it coming from me is a little bit different. So just from a little bit more of an unbiased source and yourself personally, to a Philly fan, it looks like the NFL singling out the Eagles. Sure. It's this play. They're going to remove it. It's like, what the heck? We run it so well. That's not fair. So does it, in your opinion, is it the NFL saying, oh, specifically they're out to get the Eagles, or is it just I've heard the takes of like, well, it's not a football play, it's a rugby play, something like that, but curious where you fall there.
Yeah, I don't think it's interesting because, look, the competition committee didn't propose this. This came from a club, and any club can propose a rules change. And so it wasn't like the committee got together and said, we're gonna propose a rule to get rid of this play. So they have to go through the exercise and go through the process because the Packers did propose it. So I think it's actually the opposite. I think, like I said earlier, there are some teams that just on principle will not vote this out because the Eagles won the Super Bowl and they don't want to see as targeting the Eagles. My thing is, look, this is a very successful play for the Eagles, but it's not the reason they won the Super Bowl. I mean, Saquon went for 2,000 yards. Right. I mean, the defense was incredible. It's a great play for the Eagles, but that's not, take away the tush push, they probably still win the Super Bowl. That's kind of how I feel.
I can appreciate you saying that. A lot of people can as well, because that's the other side of the argument. Oh, they're getting this play, and without that, they wouldn't have won. So, okay, I will take that one as we move on here. Curious to get your thoughts too, because for people that did watch it or see it back during, I think it was training camp preseason when we recorded last time, we were talking about the new dynamic kickoff rules. You're very instrumental in that from the XFL as well. Just initial thoughts, how you feel like it went for first official season for the NFL?
Yeah, I thought it went really well, and I think the league agrees. They wanted to see it. They put it in for 1 year. They wanted to kind of gather the injury data and see where the returns landed. And returns were up. It was still, look, the returns in 2023, it was the lowest ever. It was 22% of all kicks returned. 2024 was 33%, which is still the second lowest, but obviously a big jump from where we were the previous year. And they wanted to study the injury data, and the injury data was all positive. There isn't an unnecessary risk. There isn't a higher rate of injury on this dynamic kickoff. So now the goal is, okay, we got to tweak it. How do we get more returns, right? It's not a more dangerous play. How do we get more returns? And so the league moved the touchback to the 35. And the thinking there is, as a kickoff team, I'm not going to just kick the ball through the end zone because I'm giving up the 35. Whereas if I go and cover, the average field position start was about the 29.5-yard line. So you're going to net 5 yards if you kick, on average, if you kick and cover versus just kicking it through the end zone. So I think they're looking for 70% returns. I think we could see close to that number.
Yeah, I would because last year it almost felt like, even though, to your point, the average was 29 last year, it felt like a little bit of a mistake whenever a team didn't kick out of the end zone, or at least I say for Philly, because we were struggling with that, and that was kind of the news of like, why can't Jake Elliott or Braden Mann, kick it out of the end zone. You're getting these returns and, costing it. But at the 35, it's an incredibly valid point because that is like a mistake. If you see a kicker just launch it out of the end zone, you're like, well, okay, you're practically one play from field goal range. So I'm also thinking like late game situations, if you accidentally do that, you get one pass, spike it, or use a timeout, and there you go. We could force overtime or win a game like that. So probably significant change, I guess, from the 30 to 35.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that's going to drive the return numbers up, and we'll see. We'll see then what 2025 brings. But this play, they voted it in permanently, so it's no longer a one-year experiment. So this is the NFL is really committed to this play. And I think it's a good thing. Look, it looks a little different. It's a little shocking at first, what we're used to. But the alternative was no kickoff. The alternative was put the ball in the 25 and go. So if you like the kickoff, I like the kickoff. I like returns. I think it's exciting. I think this is a good thing.
Yes, I definitely prefer to see that than, hey, touchback, here we go. Commercial break, maybe perhaps come back to the game. Sure. It could be exciting. Some teams have some exciting returners. Eagles get Avery Williams. I've seen some other teams making moves as well, potentially with the thought in mind, like, hey, there were more returns. Now there's going to be potentially drastic more returns on that side.
And it affects roster decisions, like you said, the draft. I mean, if you can get a returner, that's going to be that becomes a big deal now. Whereas 3-4 years ago, you weren't even considering that.
Yeah, definitely a big change. I will say, as far as we talk about like different teams getting advantages or how they might play things out. The onside kick rule, though, to me is the one, or the lack thereof. Like, and I get it because it's like it's on both sides of the token. You have this rule for a reason. So yes, you're going to announce you're going to have players in the right positions. They can't move until the ball gets caught in the landing zone. All this other stuff. But do you foresee eventually some sort of way to have a unannounced onside kick? Because it's taken some of the trickery or the surprise element out of that aspect.
No doubt. I think that is definitely one of the unintended consequences of this play. The onside kick has become it with all the changes to the kickoff, even prior to the dynamic kickoff change, it became harder and harder to execute an onside kick. And in 2024, teams there's no more surprise, and they were 6%. The success rate was 6%. That's the lowest since 2001. And I saw a stat which is incredible. Since 2018. NFL teams that attempt an onside kick, their win-loss record is 2-364. So your chances, if you're attempting an onside kick, you're probably not winning that game. And the onside kick is so important because it's sometimes the only way a team that's down multiple scores can come back. And obviously, that's what everyone wants, right? Yeah, I know. We want our favorite team to win, but close, exciting games are what the league wants. And so you have to have a viable option. There was not a proposal this year for an onside kick alternative. If that number is 6% or below next year, I think we could see that onside kick alternative come back up again. And that's kind of like a fourth down play like we use in the United Football League, where you convert versus an onside kick.
I would certainly enjoy some different dynamic. I'll just say that because you make a very good point there. If the Eagles are not playing and it's just a casual game that I'm watching, yeah, I want it to be a close matchup, but it would. The occasional ones are like, oh, they scored, now they got to eat the onside kick. I mean, we know that it's coming. Or if it's then that in-between stage where they're down by multiple scores, do they do an onside kick yet or do they wait? It was kind of a foregone conclusion. It's like, well, you're not going to because you will announce it and then let the opposing team know that you're going to go for the onside kick. So, yeah, I would certainly be for that. Curious, a couple other things real quick, though, as mentioned, the different changes. So the NFL expanding instant replay assistance. Curious just kind of takeaways on what that looks like and reasons behind, I guess, the expansion of that aspect.
Well, yeah, this is something just continuing to utilize technology to help the officials get the plays right. I think some people might feel like this isn't far enough. You look at some of the plays last year where most probably the biggest one was the Vikings and Rams. Sam Darnold gets tackled in the end zone by the face mask. The officials don't call it. Ends up being a safety. Vikings lose the game. That still will not be subject to replay assist. And I think that's where people are like, wait a minute, if there's an egregious missed call, we still can't correct that. The competition committee has always been averse to allowing replay to make those subjective calls like holding and pass interference. So this will still be, the flag has to be on the field, thrown on the field, and then replay could pick it up. So if there's a hit on a defenseless player and the officials ruled that the contact was to the head neck area and replay sees that the contact was not to the head neck area, they can communicate to the on-field officials. So I think it's good. I think it'll help get more plays right. And I think we're just going to continue down this path of kind of, crawl, then walk, then jog, then run. And we'll see more of this as we move forward.
All for the transparent, get things right as much as possible, even though, there's an aspect of it that we can't everything. Some people are going to complain back and forth regardless. I didn't, hate it too much this year because you come away with a Super Bowl and all bets are off. Who cares at that point? But the other aspect too, the line to gain, I know a lot of Bills fans, some close calls in the AFC Championship game. Yeah. Did Josh Allen get the first down? Did he not? Sony Hawkeye technology, they're going to implement that, I believe, for the line to gain, and then the chain gang becomes, if I'm not mistaken, the backup if there was, I don't know, technological issues. I guess positive change.
Yeah, in case the system malfunctions or goes down. But it's interesting with this is that you think about the Josh Allen sneak against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. This technology won't take over for the officials in terms of spotting the ball. The officials still have to spot it. And then once it's on the ground, this basically replaces the chain crew. So you don't bring the chains out. Gotcha. This will basically, it's camera based, and it'll tell us exactly where the ball is in relation to the first down, but only after the officials have spotted it. So I think the next iteration, and the technology isn't there yet, the next iteration is that Josh Allen play, where is the ball in relation to the line to gain? Can we help the officials get the spot correct? But right now, this is just a measuring apparatus, and it'll take over for the chain crew, and the chain crew will be a backup.
Okay, that's a good distinction, because I was not 100% on that. I was like, okay, is that as the ball carrier's going to that point, or versus, like you say, for right now, just once the ball is spotted by the officials? So wouldn't be surprising if at some point, I mean, they've got, I think VAR for soccer has been the kind of general synopsis, like, well, they have it to determine if the ball has crossed the goal line or something like that, but probably not too far for the NFL to implement something to that measure. One last thing that I'll mention here before I let you go, and I appreciate the time. This has been a blast as always, just to get extra insight, because you have an incredible wealth of knowledge that not a lot of people can think to that insight, but also knowing what the league is thinking in these rule changes. So if you remember, and I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but Saquon Barkley against the Jacksonville Jaguars, there was a run that he had where he kind of tripped and stumbled, and it ran into his own player. It looked a little bit weird, an odd play. He hits the ground. The ball comes out. It's ruled a fumble. Trevin Walker, I believe, is the individual who returns it for the Jaguars. They score a defensive touchdown. Very odd, strange play. I didn't get to ask you, but I thought of you immediately when the play happened. I was like, I would be curious what Dean thought of that play. If you remember the play,
no, I remember.
Could you give your synopsis? Okay, on thoughts.
Yeah, and I think that, look, the bottom line is Saquon was down by contact. I mean, that is down by contact for 100 years. And I think where the replay process got involved in that, and I think they got kind of involved in, well, did he trip over, it might have been Lane Johnson, I don't know, one of his linemen's feet. There was defensive contact, and typically how you rule on that is, look, if there's defensive contact and the runner goes to the ground, doesn't regain their balance, they just go to the ground, even if that defensive contact wasn't the main reason they went to the ground, they're going to be down by contact as soon as a knee or an elbow, anything other than a hand or a foot touches the ground. And then that's really what happened on that play. I think they got caught up in did he trip over his own teammate? Did he stumble? Did he regain his balance? I think they're going to address that play in the rule book and kind of just clear it up. But that, to me, should have been down by contact. But like you said, that if that's your one play from the season, I think you ended up the Eagles fans ended up pretty good last year.
We got the good end of the deal. Yeah, you're right. And they still won the game against the Jaguars, albeit a lot closer than it needed to be, but still got the win, and ultimately at the end of the day. So, okay, I'm glad to hear that. Like I said, I did need to at least ask you because my thoughts were there from way back in the season whenever that occurred. So appreciate you coming on, Dean. I know you're an incredibly busy man, especially this time of year, league rule changes and everything else. For people watching, make sure to go follow at Dean Blandino. And you still got the Vimeo appearances and things that you got going on there? Is that the happy birthdays and
Sure, yeah, cameos, yeah.
Or cameos,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, it's quiet right now. My busy season is fantasy football draft order selection. I got to brush up on my fantasy football, not just for the cameos for my own leagues, but who's going to be the top pick and all that stuff.
Okay, there you go. Well, I'll include a link in the description so people now you get it lined up because I'm sure that Dean is going to be in high demand.
Okay, first off, thanks again to Dean for hopping on amidst his crazy busy schedule with the league officials and everything like that. Also, congrats to Chris Candle. You won the giveaway for the jersey. I just need to hear back from you, so email me, thephillyspecialshow@gmail.com, or just comment back on the pinned comment here on this video. By the way, heads up for everybody else, I'll be out on vacation the next couple days, so probably won't be back until the middle part of next week. So just in terms of live streams and everything like that, a little bit of a delay. Anyway, for now, do me a favor, drop a like on the video if you have not already. Make sure to subscribe, turn the notifications on. Till next time, this has been The Philly Special.